So what are some of the problems that Nagel has to deal with to defend his position that death is an evil, and that it is an evil because it deprives someone of something good, which is life and all that comes along with it. If you look at the bottom of page 75 again, in the last paragraph, he says essentially there are three types of problem. It's really like two, but let's follow him out. First, doubt may be raised whether anything can be bad for a man without being positively unpleasant to him. Specifically, it may be doubted that there are any evils which consist merely in the deprivation or absence of possible goods, and which do not depend on someone's minding that deprivation. That is a key point and a key obstacle that he has to overcome. Because he says below that, on page 76 in the second paragraph, that attitude or that position is basically what he says is called what you don't know can't hurt you. That is, how can we say that anything is bad for someone if they're never aware of the thing and they never experience any pain or unpleasantness because of the thing? That's a big obstacle, and that kind of, again, associated with the Epicurus position about death. So he has to deal with that, and we'll see how he deals with that. He says, and then on the top of page 76, secondly, there are special difficulties in the case of death about how the supposed misfortune is to be assigned to a subject at all. That is, if we say that something bad happens to someone, we have two things and a relation between them: something bad and someone, and then happening to. But in death, obviously, the someone is not around. The someone doesn't exist anymore. So if death is a bad thing that happens to someone, does that really make any sense? Because there's no someone for it to happen to, which is, big difficulty. He continues, there is doubt both as to who its subject is, that is, who is the subject of this dying, and as to when he undergoes it. That when do you undergo the misfortune or the evil of death? Because it seems that, this is part of Epicurus' point, obviously, that when the supposedly bad thing happens to you, you don't exist anymore. So long as a person exists, he has not yet died. And once he has died, he no longer exists. So there seems to be no time when death, if it is a misfortune, can be ascribed to its unfortunate subject. And that paraphrase of that position sounds very much like Epicurus. The third type of difficulty concerns the asymmetry mentioned above between our attitudes to posthumous and prenatal non-existence. How can the former be bad if the latter is not? Now that's the second type of symmetry. It's explained in the note, and we'll get to that. But the first problem, really, how can you call death a bad thing if the person who dies is not aware of it? And so the person who is experiencing or has experienced the supposedly bad thing never experiences any unpleasantness from it. So this is a general question. If something happens to you and you are not aware of it happening to you, and you experience no unpleasantness because of it, has something bad really happened to you? Or is it true that what you don't know can't hurt you? I was thinking of examples today. Say that you bought a lottery ticket, and you bought it, you put it in your pocket, and you forgot about it completely. Let's say that you got a knock on the head, which wiped out your memory of that day, and your lottery ticket went through the laundry, and no one ever found it. And it happened to be a winning lottery ticket, so that it was the winning ticket for, I don't know, $100 million. But because of your knock on the head, you forgot that you had it, you never cashed in. But that you never experienced a moment, you didn't know it, so you never experienced a moment of unpleasantness or regret or any kind of negative internal state because of losing this lottery ticket or not cashing it in. Could we say that something bad happened to you? Your life went on as normal, no negative internal states, no bad feelings, no suffering at all. Because you don't know what's happening. Could it still be said that something bad had happened to you when you didn't cash that ticket? or because you didn't catch that ticket. I think it's that sort of general problem. He says again on page 76 in the second paragraph, it means that even if a man is betrayed by his friends, ridiculed behind his back, and despised by people who treat him politely to his face, none of it can be counted as a misfortune for him so long as he does not suffer as a result. That's the position, that what you don't know can't hurt you position, and it's exactly the position that Nagel wants to argue against. And he thinks it rests on a mistake. He says in the last paragraph on page 76, all the questions have something to do with time. There certainly are goods and evils of a simple kind, including some pleasures and pains, which a person possesses at a given time simply in virtue of his condition at the time. But this is not true of all the things we regard as good or bad for a man. Like stubbing your toe is bad because you experience the pain. You directly experience the internal state of pain. And that's one type of bad. But not everything, Nagel says, that's bad or good that happens to us has to be experienced directly like that. And he gives us an example which is quite dramatic on page 77. And this is the person who has had a brain injury example on the second paragraph. He says, suppose an intelligent person receives a brain injury that reduces him to the mental condition of a contented infant. Now, and then he describes this person who's had this devastating brain injury, once they are at the level of an infant now, they're perfectly content. You know, they're reduced to the mental state of an infant, grown person reduced to the mental state of an infant, but they never directly experience any pain or suffering as a result of that. Now, I think his example here is to really sort of remind you, if we have, as I hope we have been, giving some credence to the Epicurean view of death, that there may be something a little wrong with it. That is, we certainly would say, normally, that that person experienced a severe misfortune, that something evil had happened to that person who'd been reduced to the mental state of an infant, even if that person doesn't mind, even if that person experiences no pain or suffering directly. Our basic instinctual response to that question, did something bad happen to such a person, is of course something bad happened to that person, even if they don't know that something bad happened to them, and even if they don't experience any pain or suffering or unpleasantness as a result of that bad thing happening to them. And how do we defend that common sense view? Well, on page 77 in the next to last paragraph, Nagel says, if these objections are invalid, it must be because they rest on a mistaken assumption about the temporal relation between the subject of a misfortune and the circumstances which constitute it. That is, the temporal relation between the subject of a misfortune, the person to whom something bad happened, and the circumstances which constitute it, that is, the circumstances which constitute the bad thing. What Nagel is saying is that Epicurus had it wrong because he was assuming that in order for death to be a bad thing, that temporal relation has to be simultaneity. That is, the subject has to be there, the bad event has to be there, and the subject has to be aware of the bad event. That is, it has to all happen at the same time and be together, the subject and the circumstances, or the subject and the event. But that is actually not true. That plenty of things that we would say are bad events, evils for someone, they don't have to match up in that way. As he says on page 78 towards the top, the circumstances may not coincide with him either in space or time. A man's life includes much that does not transpire within the boundaries of his body and his mind, and what happens to him can include much that does not take place within the boundaries of his life.